Welcome to the Intro to APA workshop for tonight. I am V. Dozier, Education Librarian and Assistant Professor with Copley Library, although Souls loves to claim me and I don't mind it at all. So, okay. What we're gonna do tonight is we're gonna do an overview of APA, what you need, the most common citation questions, and basically like the things that the resources that I use when y'all ask me questions. Okay, so there's nothing that I'm going to recommend to you tonight that I don't use myself. Okay. All of these are authoritative resources. Okay. I'm going to share my screen and then get to it. Okay. Let's start with some basics about APA. And for any of you, email is the best way to contact me. Okay. My appointment calendar is also linked on this guide. So if you need one-on-one APA instruction, let's say you're doing a particular type of project and you don't know what the APA guidelines for qualitative research reporting, how that goes, we can talk about that. Or let's say you have an annotated bibliography project and you're not quite sure if you're following APA rules correctly, we can talk about that, okay? What I won't do is your citations for you. I always have to say that because someone will always ask me. But what I will do is give you like if you say, hey V, how do I cite this thing? You know, this particular type of resource. And you've got 3 or 4 of those. And I kind of reviewed your work and I said, I see that this is a common error that you're making. I will provide an example of how to format that thing and then let you know, hey, I saw this multiple times in your bibliography. So this is something you need to go back and check. Okay. APA 7 is the official edition of APA, and it's the official edition that Souls and any school related to the Graduate Writing Center is using right now. Okay. So we are officially under APA 7, unless your instructor is doing something different and has said so in their course or in their syllabus, you're probably under APA 7. Okay. And for those of you who might have been out of school for a while and you were under some different form of APA or you were using MLA or Chicago style, this is a great time for you to get started because APA 7 is quite different from the previous editions of APA. So if you've forgotten it all, it's great. That makes it easier to teach you. You won't be confused about, oh, I remember, getting this confused with APA 6 because we used APA 6 for almost a decade. Okay. APA 6 was around for a while. Okay. Let's see. Have some FAQs. This question about should I purchase the APA 7 manual? I get this all the time, hence why it's a FAQ. And to be quite honest, I have 2 copies of the APA 7 manual because I'm bi-coastal and I got tired of lugging it around. So I have 2 copies, but I didn't own a copy of APA 6. There were so many authoritative resources out there that there was no need for me to buy it, even, someone who's teaching APA 6. But APA 7th is so different that I needed to buy a copy. And the number of authoritative resources are kind of catching up. So while I will never tell you what to do with your money, because that's your business, I will say that I own the APA manual. And if you are pressed or for some reason make a decision not to purchase the publication manual, this is why I've created the quick guide, and I've linked the authoritative resources that also supplement the APA manual. And I can talk to you, one-on-one about how you can kind of navigate those. Because really, if you learn how to cite and format the things that you're commonly using in your field, then you're probably going to be in a good space. The tricky part comes when everyone calls everything like a journal article, and it's not. So people tend to cite everything as if it's a journal article, and it's not. That can trip y'all up, which is why you'll hear me calling things a resource. That's a really broad term that encompasses all the different types of things that we can potentially cite. You can cite Twitter. You can cite a peer-reviewed journal article. You can cite a trade magazine. Okay. You can cite a blog from a trade magazine. Okay. For example, if you are familiar with Education Week, okay, that is not a peer-reviewed journal. That's a trade magazine, okay? An online trade publication for primarily K-12 educators, okay? So you would not cite the resources that are coming from EdWeek, whether you find it on edweek.com or whether you're using our subscription through Copley Library, you're not going to cite those all as if they're journal articles, because there are blogs on Education Week. There are short practitioner articles that you would cite as a magazine article, so on and so forth. Okay. And people will often ask me, like, how do I tell the difference? Web standardization practices, there really are none, okay? So it's on you as the scholar, as the researcher, as the user of this information to kind of figure out, some kind of common looks to things. Like, does it say that it's a blog anywhere on that site? Okay. Does it, what format does it take? Does it look like a conversation? These are some of the things that you should ask yourself. And the APA guide is really good at, kind of giving you those little marks. Okay. Regardless of whether you buy the manual or not, you are held to the standards. So I must say that. Okay. The other question I get all the time is, have the citation managers updated their style guides for APA 7? And yes, so the citation managers I use most often, which is Zotero, EndNote, and Mendeley, have all updated for APA 7. Okay. Are they perfect? No, they are not, but it gives you a good foundation. And if you're not familiar with what a citation manager is, stop me now so I can tell you. But if you are, I'll just keep going. Okay. Now, let's keep it moving here. So on this guide, I've listed a bunch of places where you could get resources, and I kept the APA 6 information on here so that you'll have a point of comparison. Okay. There are tutorials. So for those of you who are new to APA, I would recommend working through the APA tutorial, which is under this link here. This is a pretty quick walkthrough of some of the really common, basics of APA. Example, who can tell me the difference between a bibliography and a reference list? Or want to guess? Don't know. Sounds familiar. Okay. At least it sounds familiar. So yay. Good. Okay. So in some styles, the list of works at the end of a manuscript or a publication is called the bibliography. In some styles, it's called the reference list. APA uses both words to mean two different things. So a bibliography is a list of all of the things that you have, collected on a particular topic or discipline, whatever. Okay. The reference list are all the things that you have cited in a particular work. Okay. That's why you could have an annotated bibliography, but at the end of your paper, there's a reference list. And that only includes the things that you have cited within your paper. There's an exception for that. You don't include every single thing in your reference list. There are some exceptions to that rule. For instance, personal communication is not included in the reference list. And personal communication means anything that happens between, one individual to another or to a group that cannot be referenced by an outside party. Let's say it's, class notes, and you've included a slide from your instructor's class notes in your paper. You may cite that for that particular class, but if you were to publish that paper, the folks who are reading that paper may not have access to those class notes. So you wouldn't cite that in a publishable work. The difference? Or if you were to have a conversation with a person that you are interviewing, there's no record of that. It's not in your data set or anything, but you cite it or you quote them or yourself in your paper. You're not going to include that in your reference list. Okay. So are everybody good on bibliography versus reference list? Good. Okay. Yeah. Oh, let me scroll down. Let's see. The basics of 7th edition APA style tutorial is the one that I would recommend for you if you are very new to APA 7. The APA style blog. The 6th edition style blog was my best friend for APA. This is the official companion to the manual. So when they publish the manual and things change, people have conversations, new types of resources come out and people say, we need to know how to cite these things. Those changes go on the APA style blog. Okay. So this is a space that I often search when I'm looking for those kind of common questions or for anything new that may not have appeared in the guide. So you'll see people commenting or asking questions. This is where the APA experts, the folks who write the manual, will post new information. Purdue OWL, longtime standard in citation help, so they are listed there. One of the things that is particularly good with the Purdue OWL site is that for each equivalence to APA 6, you'll find a link. Okay. So if you you've Googled, how to cite a book chapter, and you accidentally find yourself on the Purdue OWL APA 6th edition, there will be a link that will take you to the 7th edition version. So for every page, okay? I find that really helpful. And then there's some other links here as well. Here's that link to the tutorial that I was talking about. Also included a link to the DOI lookup. The DOI stands for Digital Object Identifier. And this is a unique number and link that takes you to, at the very least, like basic information about a particular resource. Even if it doesn't take you to the full text, it'll take you to the basic information like title, author, abstract, if there is one, that thing. They're very commonly used for journal articles, and I'm now seeing them for ebooks, and sometimes even individual chapters within an ebook may have a DOI, depending. Especially if the chapters were published separately, somewhere else, and is compiled into an edited book, you may see a DOI on the book chapter. The reason why it's important to have a DOI, not only for consistency, so that everyone has a common link to this thing, but also because APA kind of expects that you will do your best effort to find the DOI and format it correctly for the resources that require the DOI, like a journal article. Okay. And if it's not listed on whatever site you got the resource from, then this is a tool that you can use to look up and see if there's a DOI. Are there DOIs on every single item? No. Or every single journal article? No. There are still some journals being currently produced that do not have DOIs. But you're supposed to give a good faith effort to find it. One of the things that you can do if you get stuck, and I have a 15-minute kind of rule about getting stuck. If you've been searching for something about 15 minutes, not finding it, not sure if you're in the right spaces, that's when it's time to email me. Okay. Then you can move on to something else in your life while you're waiting for me to respond within like a couple of days. Okay. Because I'm pretty sure y'all, like me, have other things that you could be doing instead of, spending an hour searching for a particular citation. Okay. Yeah. Anyone doing research or intend to do research where you may be working on qual or quant projects or mixed methods projects? Any point? Maybe. No? Okay. If you do, know that APA has what's called journal reporting standards. And these standards will tell you how you need to write up your methodology and present your data, how you need to format your figures, your tables, all of those things. Okay. Particularly if you plan to present in a professional setting or you plan to publish in a professional setting. Okay. So those are there. And I linked it for quant, qual, and the mixed methods. On the chart, this chart, what I've gone through and done is listed the major changes between APA 6 and APA 7, and I've folded the changes so that you can see the differences. For example, publisher location was a definite change. In APA 6, you had to include the location, the physical location of where something was published. This got a little tricky because there are publishing houses that exist in multiple spaces, like New York and Paris and DC, and no one ever knew which one to pick. Do you pick the one closest to you physically? Do you pick the one that's listed first? Like, what do you do? Well, now we don't have to care, okay? Because the location doesn't matter. What matters is the publisher's name. Okay, so for AP7, you are no longer required to figure out the location. You are looking for the publisher name. Oh, some of y'all getting a head start. I haven't started classes yet. Oh, okay. Citing multiple authors. Sorry, let me go back up. Is a change. 3 to 5 authors. There was a difference between how you would present that in an in-text or also called a parenthetical citation the first time, and then for the subsequent occurrences of that resource. Now, you would only list the first author, and I'm talking about parenthetical or in-text citations here, followed by et al. Unless for some reason that's going to create some, like you would have two in-text citations that look the same. Okay, like Smith et al. 2019, and you have another one that's maybe a Smith et al. 2019, but it's two different references. Okay. So in that case, you would probably do something like a 2019A, 2019B. So you could, have a distinction. Okay. Yeah. Previously, APA 6 would only provide guidance for up to 7 authors. And in the social and behavioral sciences, it is more rare than not to see that many authors on a single work. If you were going to see something like that, it is more common on like maybe a presentation, conference proceeding, or like a group paper from an association or conference or something like that. But now you have the option and the guidance for up to 20. This is particularly important if you were citing, let's say you're citing a major association work and you want to list everyone who contributed as an author, you now have guidance for how to do that. Okay. So that's listed here. DOIs. The other thing about DOIs, previously you had 2 ways. You could either list a DOI as the number itself, or you could list it as a URL. Now it's all URL style. Okay. So that when a person who's interested in using a particular reference can click on it, they go to that source instead of having to try and, plug in the DOI to, a DOI lookup or something. They made it easier. Also, retrieved from, we don't have to use that particular phrase anymore. Okay. Unless a retrieval date is needed. Now, a retrieval date is most commonly used if there is a frequently changing content on, let's say, a website. And you need to archive, like, I got this information on this date. Because, maybe 2 weeks from now, that content won't exist, or it may be at a different location on that web page. Okay. So now, or I should say website. So that would be an example of an exception. Okay. Next up, website names. APA 6 did not provide us any guidance for how to include a website name, and we now have guidance for that. This is important for things like, HuffPost, Medium, any type of online resource. Now there's a space for where we can include the site name. Okay. And all of these little bits and pieces are supposed to be helpful information for an external user to find the resource that you're using. That's the whole point, okay? If someone were to look at your work and they were interested in a resource that you used, they would be able to, find it. Even if they couldn't get the full text, they could at least get to some form of it. Okay. The exceptions for this is if the resource was written by a group or organization, you can use the name of the group or organization as the author instead of an individual author. Okay. So if it's a society or an association and you've cited a blog post from them, then you could use the group name. Okay. Let me pause here and ask if anyone has any questions right now. All right. Okay. eBooks. This is a fairly big change, and I like it because it makes the ebook citations more concise. Previously, folks were driving themselves a little batty. Funny because I just realized that I was using Dracula as my example here. I'd forgotten that. But I digress. Trying to figure out what the format of a particular electronic resource was, especially if it was, say a Kindle book versus, something for Nook or whatever. And people are like, oh, we need to designate the different platforms because, this one might have numbers and this one might not. Not necessary. We don't care. We don't care anymore. What's important is not necessarily that granular of what platform it's on, but what we do care about is the general format of an item. For instance, if this is an audiobook versus, a narrative ebook with print, then we need to know that that's different. Okay. But outside of the format, the citation essentially looks the same. But with an audiobook, it is important that you remember that you will probably include the narrator. And APA 7 gives us a lot more guidance for how to include important contributors to a work that's not just primary author or editors. Now we have spaces for directors, for narrators, for podcast hosts. We have a lot more guidance for how we can give people who are contributing in a profound way to these works the credit that they're due. So that brings me to another point about APA 7, is that there was an intentional effort with APA 7 to be more equitable, to attribute more to creators of works, to be a little bit more cognizant of humanity. Okay. So you're going to see some changes in APA 7 that we didn't see before with APA 6 or other additions. And this is what I was talking about with the content contributors other than authors or editors. And I listed the pages in the APA manual that that's listed on. And if they ever post it to the APA style blog, I'll update it with that link as well. I'm constantly updating this document, so it's dynamic. So let's get into more equitable practices that we had a lot of discussions about, leading up to APA 7, and people are still having discussions about. Previously, folks would assume a gender identity, gender expression for the people that they were citing. And we had very vague guidelines for how to do that. Okay. And so in effort to be more equitable and fair to people, we are no longer, and the guidance is that you do not assume someone's gender. Okay. So we're not guessing because somebody's name sounds masculine or sounds feminine or whatever. Okay. They, them, and their, the default pronoun or how you would refer to an individual. Okay. And the exceptions for that would be, say an author has identified their pronouns on their particular work. So you can add that, if this person identifies as she, and that is on the work, you could refer to that person as she, but the default is they, them, and their. Descriptive phrases, we did not have guidelines for that, so things were kind of all over the place, but now the practice is to acknowledge a person's humanity above their issue or above, some type of socially constructed identity. Okay. What I mean by that is that the effort is to be specific when possible. And this also requires to have a level of knowledge and to constantly seek knowledge and stay abreast of like who we're talking about and how they prefer to refer to themselves. Here are some common examples. If you are talking about gay men, you would say gay men. You're not going to call them the gays. Okay. That is not okay. No more than it is to say, instead of saying Black people, you would refer to us as Black people and not the Blacks. Okay, that's a group of crayons, right? Another example, and I see this quite often in the scholarly work, instead of drug users, so we're putting the person's issue above their humanity, you would say people who use drugs. We're putting humanity before the issue. Capitalization. We've had some intense discussions about capitalization of races or ethnicities. And it is official. You would capitalize the being Black. Because when you are referring to people, you would acknowledge it as such and respect it as such. because the lowercase black is a color, that's a crayon. Okay. Now, people have asked me, and there is still intense debate, when it is a person of color, Black, Indigenous, person of color, BIPOC, and so the capitalization of white. Capitalize or should you not? Well, according to APA, white should be capitalized. That would be the rule when you are referring to people. However, there's still very intense debate about if the authors, have a specific reason or intent or why they do not. Then are you going to force a person who is probably or maybe a person of an underrepresented, marginalized, historically, marginalized group? Are you going to force them to capitalize the race of who they may see as their oppressor? Because that may be like a intentional, conscious choice of protest. I don't know, but there's a big debate about it. So there's that. Finally, and I see this a lot, so heads up, make sure that you're paying attention about this one. Age ranges. People are very flighty about age ranges, especially when they're referring to particular population. Okay. Be more specific about the population that you're actually referring to. Well, instead of saying people over the age of 65, when your actual population group only 65 to 70, be more specific and say people in the range of 65 to 70 or 75, whatever. Okay. Font choice. We had one official previously, and now we have options. This is also not just for the sake of letting people have choice, but it is also helpful for accessibility purposes. And also those who may be, dyslexic. Okay. So for accessibility purposes, we now have more options, which is great. Another one, the student versus professional papers. Okay.
Sorry, I have a question in regards to the font.
Mhm.
So it is only the type of font, and then that's the size number. That size cannot be changed, right?
These are the official AP ones.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Now your instructor might say something different. So I make a distinction between APA and APA adjacent. Some of our lovely faculty are APA adjacent and they have their own preferences for things. So if you're turning in something for an assignment, follow whatever your instructor says. Okay. Let's see. If you are going to be in SOLS is preference using the professional paper template. Okay. Because there are two types of kind of formatting styles for APA. One is the student paper style. The other one is the professional paper style. Well, if you are a graduate student in SOLS, then the expectation, unless otherwise specified by your instructor, is that you will follow the structure of the professional paper template. And in that mindset, let's see, which one? This gives you an example of what the professional paper kind of look like with its, or at least the intro to it with the different heading styles. Okay, so this is also linked on the guide. And there are some changes with the heading styles too that we'll talk about. But I wanted to give you a quick glance of like what this kind of flow looks like. And there are also examples within the APA manual as well, okay? More detailed examples. We'll go back to the quick guide. Running head. The words running head are no longer required. And for professional papers, which anytime you see a reference to professional paper or student paper on this guide, it would be in the different colors. So the kind of mauve here for professional and the gold for student. But professional papers would have the running head plus the page number. And because, you know, we're treating work as if you were going to eventually publish it, then you would follow this style with your professional running head here and the page number in the, which would be left aligned. And the running head is, well, right aligned for the page number, left aligned for the actual running head. Another thing that's different is that previously the running head was limited to about 50 characters. Now the running head needs to be the most important kind of synopsis, little snapshot of your title, okay? The most important words of your title should be in your running head. I still find a lot of folks, you know, kind of following the 50 character rule, but you know, that's fine. But be cognizant that APA 7 says, you know, most important words in your title, and you're no longer using the phrase running head across each time. Heading levels changed quite a bit. So I have the heading levels, kind of like a little snapshot here for what it was in APA 6, but for APA 7, the major changes to the heading levels happened in levels 3 through 5. Okay. And these changes were made basically to make sure that the headings were a bit more visible to people. And they made more sense with the flow of the paper. I found that most emerging scholars and a lot of people in general, just even professional writers and those of us who are publishing for, you know, scholarly promotion, tenure, blah, blah, blah. Some of us aren't using like level 4 and 5. Okay, so if you learn level 1 through 3 really well, you're probably going to be in a really good shape. Okay, so learn how to format levels 1, 2, and 3. And then if you need level 4, or you find yourself needing level 5, then, you'll always have a reference for how to do those. Okay. Would it be helpful to anybody to kind of talk about like I would kind of see the heading level here, but we could do a more realistic breakdown of what that looks like. That'd be helpful.
Yes, please.
There's a sample paper. Let's see. Okay. I'm gonna blow this up quite a bit. All right. So title page. Professional title here. Your name here, your affiliation. And then if you need an author's note for, say, how you collected your data, who's funding your project, anything like that would go in the author's note. This is the format of the abstract here with your author supplied keywords. That is an important part of the professional paper. Okay. So here we have your running head, page number, title here, and the headings go in order. So you can't just skip from level 1 to level 3 without having a level 2 inside. Your level 1 headings will probably be things like introduction, literature review, methodology, conclusion. Those are typical level 1 headings. Level 2 headings, let's say we're writing a paper about student evaluations here. The level 2 heading may be how online administration of student evaluations happen. And then for, say, like an student eval, a second level 2 heading may be, an actual printed administration of student evaluations. Okay. So you would have a level 1 heading of here's my introduction, level 2 heading of online administration of student evaluations, level 2 heading of printed student evaluations. Okay, next. There's another level 2 heading here. Level 2 heading, purpose of the present study, which often occurs in the introduction. So purpose, problem statement, something like that, that's usually a level 2 heading. No? So you notice how even in this example, we still haven't even gotten to level 3. Here we are, level 2 heading, talking about the instrument and design. Now we've gone back to level 1 with the results, back to level 2 with the response rates here. 2, back to level 1. Finally, we have a level 3 heading. Okay. So remember which section we're in. We're talking about, I believe, the results here. We have a level 2 heading where we're talking about how these results, what was their implication of the results in practice, which is a level 2 heading here. And then we have a level 3 heading that talks about a specific implication for practice, which is improving particular type of response rate, a set response rate. Okay. And then we have a second level 3 heading, evaluating particular scores. Now we've gone back to level 2 heading of conclusion. Now we're at the reference list. Okay. So even in the sample paper that's provided by APA, we still didn't get to level 4. Again, if you learn heading 1, 2, and 3, and how to navigate those pretty well, you're going to be in really good shape for most of the writing that you do. Okay. Questions? I know I kind of blew through that. Okay. Other formatting changes, for those of you who like the double space after the end of each sentence, that is no longer necessary. Officially, we are on 1 space after ending punctuation. Okay. The 2 space rule was a holdover from when, we were all typing and using carbon copies. So typing on actual typewriters, not like computers or laptops. So now 1 space after ending punctuation. And I have the pages listed here in reference to the use of quotation marks versus the use of italics for linguistic examples, and what you use for emphasis, what you use for linguistic purposes. And our example here is to put they in quotation marks instead of they in italics. And I find myself guilty of this all the time, because when I want to put emphasis on something, I often use italics when I'm writing. So that's a change for me. Okay. Now, we've been at this for about an hour. How are y'all feeling? You okay? You have any burning questions right now?
We're good. I'm good.
All right. Okay, so here are some formatting and margin information here. Pay attention for the professional versus student ones, because there are some differences. Student papers will not have the running head on the subsequent pages or anything like that. They just have the page number. The margins, folks try to be funny with the margins all the time, especially when they have like page requirements or whatever. So, remember the days of like changing it from 12.5 to 12 or whatever. Okay. Well, we have more clear rules on margins and font size and things like that, even though we have a few more options. So for you all, the thing that is of most importance is that for things that may be printed, so if you have a thesis or a dissertation or a capstone project of some kind that may be actually printed and archived as a print copy, you may have different margin sizes for that. So if you're in a PhD program and you want to get your dissertation printed, you may have to change the margins. But other than that, it's 1-inch margins for APA. Heading levels, we talked about that. And I will say that you tend to see heading levels 4 and 5 more so when you are using like an outline or let's say it's some type of scientific paper and it's kind of getting granular like that. You may see heading levels 4 and 5 being used. Microsoft Word styles menu is really helpful, as is in Google Docs, if that's your preference. Paragraph styles can also be modified for APA, so you can set that yourself. You can also modify Microsoft Word for that. Lists, there's information about when is it appropriate to use a bulleted list versus a numbered list. That information is in there. Tables. This is important when you're doing presentations. So if you are presenting, using PowerPoint or anything like that, and you need to construct a table, or if you are, doing a manuscript for potential publication purposes, then there are guidelines for what your table, the essential elements of a table, essential elements of a figure. And what those look like. So those items are there. Table of contents is now called the order of pages. Hey, it sounds really fancy and puts me back in like King Arthur times. The order of pages. Okay. But now we have more guidance on how those should be constructed. Okay, and what order things go in. So people try to get a little funky sometimes. So this is an effort to kind of make things a little bit more consistent, make things a little bit more standardized. Order of pages, title page, abstract, whatever text you're doing. Footnotes, if you have any. And there's also guidance about when a footnote is appropriate. Okay. Tables go before figures. Figures go before any appendices. Student papers tend not to have an abstract, although I have seen that instructors are trying to encourage undergrads to write abstracts, which I think is great. They learn how to summarize their work into bite size. Let's see, what else? Professional papers, paper title, author name, affiliation, we talked about this before. The serial comma. Items of 3 or more and lettered lists, we use the serial comma. Or if you're already using commas in the work, then use the semicolon. Paraphrasing. So direct quote, you're taking the words directly from the source you're getting it from. You put those in quotation marks or you block quote, however you do it. Paraphrasing often gets people in trouble when they are citing because they forget to cite the paraphrases. You must cite when you paraphrase from a particular work. So yes, you are putting it in your own words, but you are getting the information, that content from the resource. So you should cite the person who, cite in-text citation, parenthetical citation for your paraphrasing. Don't get too block quote happy. But if you need to use a block quote for any reason, there's guidance on how to do that. And then down towards bottom, look away if you are squeamish about scrolling here. Down towards the bottom, I have some quick answers for common citations. And including the parenthetical or narrative citation. So parenthetical is when it's usually at the end of that, that quote or paraphrase, and the author and the date are within the parenthetical phrase here. Narrative citation is usually when you include the name of the author or authors with et al, and then the date in parentheses. There's two differences for in-text citation. But we have a web page on a website, a journal article with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 authors here. An entire book, a magazine article, Facebook here, which is interesting because our Facebook guidance says that we need to provide the first 20 words of the Facebook post as the title. And if the update includes images or videos, indicate that in the square brackets. This is something that you definitely want to have a date for, okay? Because we can edit Facebook posts. Okay? So you need to capture the date that you actually captured that content in case there is an update, and someone goes back and they're like, nah, actually this person changed this content, it's no longer there. You would have the retrieval date of that source. Twitter. YouTube. And YouTube can, YouTube, Twitter, social media, any of these items can be a little funky when you're looking for who to credit the work. If there's a person's name, use it. If there's a person's name plus their, screen name, preference the person's name over the screen name. If it's a corporate body, like an organization or a group, then there are examples for how to include them as the author. Edited book chapters here, which is slightly different from a whole book, because with an edited book chapter, you're including that particular chapter's authors, specific authors first, the name of their work, Then the editors of that particular book, and then the umbrella title of the book. The pages that the particular chapter covers within that whole work, and then publisher and DOI if you have it, or if it just ends at the publisher, then that's fine too. Oh. We went through the entire guide, y'all. We did. We went through the entire guide. Questions?
No question.
Question. Do you feel better about, feel like you know a little bit more about APA 7 now? Okay, getting some thumbs up. Cool. See some head nods.
Yeah, I think this is good. Makes me think about what's involved in it. I won't really know more until I actually start writing, though. So I think then I'll actually see what part is what I'm actually going to be using and citing and all that. But at least I kind of have an idea of just what the format is and what's expected.
And I would recommend that you start practicing identifying different types of resources. So, what's the typical format of a peer-reviewed or a scholarly published paper? What does that look like? What does a practitioner paper look like? Blog posts versus just regular web page content. What does that look like? Dissertation, because how you cite a dissertation is different from how you would cite a book. And you would actually include the format is if this is a thesis or not. And let's see, what are the other big ones that I see quite often? Social media, see a lot of that. There are some nuances between like YouTube versus Twitter, but they are a lot more standardized now. And don't require as much kind of like really odd information as they did in APA 6. The book chapters are cited quite a bit versus whole books, but it depends on discipline. And in Souls, I see a lot of book chapter citations instead of whole book. And yeah. Oh, and data sets. I'm starting to see more people citing data sets, which is good because you should. If you're using something from NCES, so Educational Statistics, National Center for Educational Statistics, you should cite that. And there's guidance for how to do that as well. Oh, and another question I get quite often, how do you cite a source within a source? So secondary source citation, and what is the APA expectation of that? The expectation is actually that you would go and find the original source and cite directly from that source. However, if for some reason you are unable to do so, then there's guidance for how to cite a secondary source. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick. It happens more than you think. So I actually need to I need to add that to the guide because I get that question quite a bit now. The secondary sources here. This is when you start seeing as cited in. But remember the first step is try to find the original source. And if you cannot, then you can use the secondary source rules. That's something that you can also send to me. Hey V, I'm trying to track down this primary source. Can you help me find it? Yeah. Okay. Nothing else. I'm going to stop the recording and let y'all go. But before everyone steps away, let me take a screenshot real quick of participant list so that I can send that to I can send that out and